And we're here at the International Energy Forum Ministerial meeting here. And Dr. Carole Nakhle joins me now. She is the CEO of Crystol Energy. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, you're looking at fiscal regimes and a lot of interest in this. And indeed, tell us a little bit about why this is so important.
Everybody talks about the importance of attracting investment in the oil and gas sector, but investment is not going to be parachuted. It requires different factors to drive it. And these factors are prices, oil and gas prices, the geological potential, the availability of infrastructure, the political stability and security, and of course the fiscal regime. Now, if you look at these factors, I would say the main factor which is under government control is the fiscal regime. So there is something that governments can influence directly in order to affect investment by de facto is the fiscal regime. So that's why it's very important to get it right. And what we're seeing today, we're seeing competition for international capital, and governments are using the fiscal regime to attract the capital and compete among each other. So we see several countries have reformed their fiscal regimes. Others, like Algeria, have just announced recently that they will also reform their energy fiscal regime to attract investment. Now, of course, investment, you need much more than just announcing reforms. You need to implement them correctly. You need the fiscal terms to be more profit related, not putting too much upfront impact on investment. So it's not easy to say we want to change our fiscal regime to attract investment. You need to get it right.
Now, at this conference here, what we're hearing from a lot of the ministers and a lot of the people here is a worry about investment and a worry about the fact that we haven't seen enough investment in the oil and gas industry for the last few years. Are you concerned about that? And you hearing that concern from your clients at the moment? And ultimately, what can be the consequences?
There is a lot of uncertainty in the market. We don't know where the prices are heading. We don't know where costs are heading. We don't know where the talent is coming from. So there is definitely the sentiment. But guess what? It's not the first time that the industry is faced with these kind of uncertainties. This is the industry which is more than 100 years old, and it managed to deal with more uncertainties than what we are seeing today. But again, we go back to the issue of the importance of the fiscal terms, the licensing, the legislation, the transparent, stable, attractive system. That will make a big difference to where investment will go.
What can governments do quickly to make sure that that's in place? Because if the terms are not attractive, and we hear that from time to time when international companies are bidding on blocks, that maybe they don't bid because it's too expensive or the actual terms are not the best. Where's maybe best practice, or how can they perhaps learn from each other to make sure they're win out in this competitive world?
There is no such a thing as an ideal or perfect fiscal regime. I mean, you can learn from other countries' experiences, their failures and successes, but you have to adapt the fiscal regime to your own country's conditions, whether it's the geology or the availability of infrastructure, or whether you have a national oil company or a state participation in the sector. So we look at each country by country case to set up the fiscal regime. However, the big mistake people do is when they think the fiscal regime is all about the level of the tax rate, which is not correct, because I can go to a country like Norway where the government take is 78%, but it is all purely profit related. Whereas in other countries, such as in the US, there is more weight on the revenue. So as soon as you generate your first barrel, you have to pay taxes. So it's much more than the level of the tax rate or government take. It's about stability, it's about transparency, it's about simplicity of the fiscal regime.
Now, we're here at a ministerial session, and many years ago, perhaps people from outside of the ministries weren't invited to participate in this. So I think we look at the evolution of the International Energy Forum that really brings so many more people together. How important do you think that is in terms of what you're doing here, and also combining it with all the work from the ministries and meeting the CEOs and the ministers together?
I think this is very important to bring various players together, various stakeholders, because not only about governments talking to governments, about governments and industry, and the industry is also affected by what consumers want. Consumers are also affected by, for example, what think tanks, academia do. So I think to have a more comprehensive approach, it's important to bring all these stakeholders together, and it's already a very positive step that the IEF has taken by widening its target audience.